redress if they feel aggrieved, if they feel they have not been listened to, they have been wrongdoing in that sense. Rule of law will have to survive.
With the funding, UNDP is also expected to work with South Sudan civil society, youth and women groups to implement the program. Traders in Mundri West County of Western Equatoria State are calling on the police to protect their properties after thieves broke into their shops and stole goods. According to the chairperson of the Chamber of Commerce in Mundri West County, traders call on the government to give chances so that they could be part of the security team. Ismail Basha says more than 6 shops were raided early this week. He spoke to iRadio this morning from Mundri West.
ina bagdara gafar su gaban mumun sawa mona bolsa wala mar bilen de mataki pataw du kakin bada pataw kamsa du sit kamsa sita marsaji de al hasle awal mar bilen yan silin ada gurus ke tirim du katin ada dia ata gurus silu de phone silu 100 phone nia de silu min dukan alam de waja tajar batal
gurus kam
gurus de taban silu min du katin baraw gurus de taban في دكان وايد سلو متوكليا في تان كمسة كمسين يعني برابر كان اللي مكله بوصلوا حاجة كل مفعول بوصلوا مليون حاجة 1 million.
For his part, the police commissioner of Mundri West County Major General Ishaq Abdod stated that they lack enough police personnel in the county. He says most of the police personnel are in the cantonment area. However, Ishaq explained that they are still providing security at the market with few people around.
هم طبعا في ايام الاخيره لانه امطار بقت كثيره وفي عمليه بتاعت سطو على الدكاكين في سطو على الدكاكين قبل يومين 3 ده حجه سامعه ان احنا وفرنا حراسه في نقطه كامله قاعده في السوق في نقطه قاعده في السوق اما ان احنا هسه ان احنا هنزيد الحمايه وان احنا هنعمل قوه زياده لان عندنا في ضغط القوه عموما القوه بتاعتنا الموجوده في المقاطع عموما قوه ضعيفه جدا جدا السوق ده محتاج مثلا زي حاجه بتاعت 12 نفر سوق كبير الموجود حاليا العامل فيه زي 6 بس في القوه يعني واللي انه حسب انت عارفين ان القوه كلها ماشيه كونتينمنت اريا ولا حتى ما يتخرجوا.
You are listening to iRadio Afternoon News. The Minister of Health has suspended the Undersecretary at her ministry following dispute between her and the Vice President for Service Cluster, Hussein Abdelbagi, over administrative changes at Juba Teaching Hospital. On Sunday last week, Hussein Abdelbagi ordered the Undersecretary at the Ministry of Health to commission the reviewing and restructuring of the management of the country's main referral hospital. In a letter dated 10th of October 2021 and addressed to the Undersecretary Dr. Victoria Anib Majur, the Vice President directed for a conduct of necessary changes in the management of the Juba Teaching Hospital that may assist in finding an amicable solution to the ongoing crisis at the institution. The development issued following health workers' strike at the hospital. In a statement obtained by iRadio, Abdelbagi instructed the Undersecretary to find a cordial result to the standoff created by some of the doctors. However, on Friday, the Minister, Elizabeth Achue, rejected the managerial changes and revoked the directive involving the transfer of directors and Director General at the Ministry of Health and the Juba Teaching Hospital as per the orders of Hussein Abdelbagi dated 10th October. On Sunday last week, the Vice President in charge of Service Cluster issued another letter warning Elizabeth Achue from blocking the instructions issued by his office. Abdelbagi described the minister's action as gross negligence of duties after Achue left the country for the UN General Assembly in September without delegating anyone to run the affairs in the health ministry. Defiant Elizabeth Achue yesterday issued a ministerial order suspending the Undersecretary at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Victoria Anip, indefinitely. The order partly read, and I quote, "In exercise of the powers conferred upon me under Article 114, carbon copy, and Article 31 of the Transitional Constitution of the Republic of South Sudan 2011, as amended and read together with the Republican Decree number 22/2021. I, Honorable Elizabeth Achue-Yol, Minister of Health, do hereby issue this ministerial order for the suspension of Dr. Victoria Anib Majur from her duties as the Undersecretary for the Ministry of Health." End quote. The Republican Decree number 23/2021 yesterday saw Mr. Samson Paul Baba as the acting Undersecretary. Achue also directed for a formation of disciplinary committee to investigate and report her within 90 days, citing the Provisions of Civil Service Act and regulations. You are listening to iRadio Afternoon News. The UN Commission of Human Rights said threats against leaders of civil society organizations are undermining the peace process. In a statement issued yesterday, the Commission said it is alarmed and dismayed with the ongoing threats, harassment, and intimidation of prominent human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society actors. It says many of whom have played a key role in the country's peace and justice process. My colleague Lasuba Memo files this brief report.
The National Security Services have forced some activists to flee the country while their colleagues and families face intimidation and harassment. The UN rights body said, and I quote, "The civic space in South Sudan is eroding at an accelerating pace, undermining efforts to achieve a sustainable peace in South Sudan." End quote. The report comes 2 days after the renowned civil society activist Edmond Yakani urged the unity government to make commitments to improve civic freedoms in the country. Prior to Yakani's call, the South Sudan Catholic Bishops' Secretariat last month said it was concerned by the shrinking civic space in the country. But the call for freedom of expression didn't start recently. Since South Sudan's independence in 2011, members of the public and other opposition political parties have been complaining of the same situation. They said every attempt to stage a peaceful protest to express disappointment at the leadership was suppressed by the government. The latest statement by the UN experts pointed out that the self-exile by Jammeh David Pollock and Wani Michael is the result of the continuous threats against activists. Mr. Pollock is a member of the Technical Committee to conduct consultative process on Truth, Reconciliation and Healing, a position reaffirmed in May by the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, while Wani Michael was Executive Director of the OK Africa Foundation, a youth organization in South Sudan. The individuals have had their bank accounts and those of the non-governmental organizations they lead blocked on government orders. This occurred after the Vice President, Dr. James Waniga, reminded government institutions to facilitate access to information and the freedom of media for South Sudan to prosper. The Commission says the state's targeting of high-profile human rights defenders will have a chilling effect on civil society and will discourage public participation and corrode confidence in the important processes of transitional justice, the constitution-making process, and national elections. Yet these processes, it says, are essential for the success of the transition envisaged by the 2018 Revitalized Peace Agreement. For iRadio, I'm Lasuba Memo.
Thank you, Lasuba Memo. And now to the international news, my colleague Joanne Mole joins us.
Hello and good afternoon. You're Ajak. Now to the international scene. We get to Sudan, where pro-civilian leaders have called for mass protests on Thursday amid rising tensions between those in charge of steering the country towards elections. The demonstrations have been called in response to a continuing sit-in staged since last week in front of the presidential palace in the capital, Khartoum, by an alliance of rebel groups and political entities. Rallies have already begun in several cities and in the capital Khartoum, the streets leading to the General Command of the Armed Forces. These groups used to be part of the Forces of Freedom and Change (FFC), a loose coalition that was at the helm of the months-long protest that led to the military removal of former President Omar al-Bashir in April 2019. And finally, Kenya lifted a nationwide curfew on Wednesday that has been in place since March, 2020 to curb the spread of the coronavirus, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced. The East African nation, which has a population of 54 million, has recorded over 200,000 infections since the pandemic erupted and more than 5,000 COVID-19 deaths, Health Ministry data shows. The country has received 7.5 million doses of vaccines so far, and 4.5 million people have had at least one dose, the data shows. Kenyatta said infection rates had fallen, with less than 5% of tests each day proving positive. That's all we had for the international news. Now back to you, Yar Ajak.
Thank you, Joanne. And now to the sports news, my colleague Lasuba Memo joins us.
Thanks, Yara Jack. In the world of sports, South Sudan national football team has dropped 2 places in the latest FIFA rankings released today. This is from 165 to 167, coming behind Indonesia and Bermuda. The drop could be attributed to the recent matches during the FIFA playoffs, days in which South Sudan lost to Morocco and Guinea in friendly matches, all in Morocco. Still about South Sudan, the national women football team lost 8-0 against its Kenyan counterpart in the African Qualification Cup at Nyayo Stadium yesterday. Elsewhere, Cristiano Ronaldo headed the winner 9 minutes from time as Manchester United came back from 2 goals down to record a memorable Champions League triumph against Atlanta at Old Trafford. Ole Gunnar's side had been booed off at the break. Such was the lack of invention they showed in falling behind 2 goals from Mario Pasalic and Marith Demiral. But the jeers turned to cheers as United, roared on by an increasingly frenzied crowd, rallied to complete one of their great European victories. Marcus Rashford reduced the deficit with an excellent finish 8 minutes after the restart before his keeper Harry Maguire dropped home after being left free at the far post to get on the end of Edison Cavani's flick. But inevitably, it was Ronaldo who won the game, just as he did 3 weeks previously against Villarreal. And in the rest of the matches, Juventus extended their winning start to this season's Champions League with victory over Zenit St. Petersburg 1-0. Gerard Piqué scored Barcelona's first Champions League goal this season as Ronald Koeman's side beat Dynamo Kiev to end their losing start to Group E. Piqué volleyed in a superb opener from Jordi Alba's cross as the hosts found the net in Europe for the first time in more than 4.5 years. Barcelona were comfortable, if not clinical, and success keeps their hopes of reaching the knockout stage alive. Chelsea put their Champions League campaign back on course by thrashing Malmo at Stamford Bridge, but it was victory